Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our keynote panel on Humanity First Agenda for the Digital Age. Good afternoon to you from Melbourne and Geelong in Australia. My name is Ivana Jurko. I am Evidence and Influence Lead for Humanitech, an initiative of Australian Red Cross, and I will be your moderator tonight. Now, as is custom in our country, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the many lands on which we meet. In my case, this is the Wathoran people of the Kulin Nation. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I would also like to welcome many First Nations participants who may be with us in the audience tonight. Now, tonight kicks off the Red Cross, the Australian Red Cross engagement in the IFRC's Data and Digital Week. We are absolutely thrilled to be part of this week-long showcase and even a celebration, if you like, of insights, innovations, inspirations, and talent from across the global Red Cross Red Crescent network. And I'd like to thank the Solferino Academy from IFRC for making this event possible. Now, in terms of our engagement throughout the week, this session will, set the scene for what's to come in terms of Australian Red Cross contributions. Tonight, specifically, we bring to you an exciting panel of experts from Humanitech and our partners in the Centre of Excellence for Automated Decision-Making in Society, as well as the Trust Alliance, to talk about their perspectives and insights from their work that connect to this central topic of how do we ensure humanity first agenda for digital age? How do we ensure that data and technology create benefits for society, promote human dignity and safety, and do so in trustworthy ways? So tonight, after the introductory remarks, I'll invite the panelists to provide their perspectives. And after the initial half an hour of that sort of moderated conversation, we will go into a Q&A session, and we will leave plenty of time for questions and answers. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our fantastic panel tonight. So joining us, we have Amanda Robinson. Amanda is the founder and head of Humanitech, and she has been instrumental in driving social innovation initiatives in Australian Red Cross to enable that social and humanitarian impact at scale. Also with us is distinguished Professor Julian Thomas. He is a director of the Centre of Excellence that I've already mentioned, which is creating a very unique and holistic insights into automated decision-making and society. And Australian Red Cross is a very proud partner of the centre. And last but certainly not least, a very experienced humanitarian and development practitioner, Katy Southall. She is a manager of the Trust Alliance, of which Australian Red Cross is partner. And the Trust Alliance is all about enabling cross-sector collaboration towards a good digital identity ecosystem. So a really great panel to share their insights and to have a conversation with and explore the issues. Now, in terms of the content that we will cover tonight, we will explore the highlights from the Humanitech report on future vulnerability, humanity in the digital age, which we published earlier in the year. We'll talk about how the Centre is investigating the social implications of automation, and then how the Trust Alliance is putting humanity first approaches to technology into practice. Now, the links to the various websites from our initiatives, including the report, are all available in the chat function for your future reference. Before we dive into the conversation, just a notification, I guess, I'm sure you've already noticed it all, that this session is being recorded so that our colleagues who are in different time zones or other stakeholders can come and watch it at a later stage. I would also encourage you to use the Q&A tab to post your questions as the conversation evolves. And I would also encourage you to upvote questions, because that will give us a really good sense of where your interests lie so that we can address those. Okay, I will stop sharing now. Success. And I would like to invite Amanda first to give us her insights and perspective onto the topic of humanity first. So Amanda, can you please give our audience a quick recap of Humanitech's purpose and approach, and also an overview of some of the key findings from the report that point us to what this humanity first approach to data and technology should look like?
Fabulous, thanks Ivana. So as we all know, artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital platforms, distributed ledger, these are just some of the technologies that are changing how the world works, how we create products and services, how we relate to each other, and how we connect with people, places, and things. These technologies are advancing fast and reaching far across the fabric of our society. The tools, systems, and platforms of this technological revolution present us with an incredible opportunity to tackle some of the hardest social and humanitarian challenges, whether it's through better access to help when people need it, genuine participation for all, or amplifying the voices of marginalised communities. Rapid advancements in technology also mean the world is changing in profound ways, and as a society, we are struggling to keep pace. The speed of innovation and increasing pervasiveness of technology on our lives create risks of misuse, unintended consequences, or perpetuation of vulnerability. Our institutions need to adapt to make the most of these opportunities afforded by the technology, but at the same time addressing inequalities and protecting individuals. And so it was within this context that Australian Red Cross established Humanitech, a think and do tank which seeks to harness the power of technology for good by putting humanity at its centre. Leading with our core principle of humanity first, we want to help shape the future of humanity so that technological advancements safeguard and improve the dignity of all people, especially the most vulnerable, by creating opportunities for new forms of social, civic, and economic participation. We seek to promote human safety and empower resilient communities by leveraging technology to better prepare for and respond to risks and crises. And we want to build trust in society through increased opportunities for meaningful engagement with each other and with institutions. So how do we do this? Well, our approach is centred around some key approaches and themes. Firstly, we wish to convene the best minds working at the intersection of technology and social innovation. And we do this through events such as our upcoming Humanitech Summit, as well as forging partnerships with other organisations and institutions and thought leaders who support our work. We're exploring the role of emerging technology in meeting humanitarian need, creating evidence through sharing, collaboration, research and experimentation, and amplifying ideas and solutions with the greatest potential for scale and impact through our research and insights, as well as the solution development through our lab. By deeply engaging with these issues at the intersection of technology and humanity, we seek to influence so that emerging technology serves humanity by putting people at the core and in control. So how will we know when we've been successful? Well, we'll know this when humanitarians and civil society organisations have better access to the skills and knowledge and feel equipped to use frontier technologies for good, as well as being able to address the risks. We'll be successful when people in organisations responsible for developing technology understand and are able to promote responsible, ethical, inclusive, humanity-first approaches to innovation. And when we have leaders who are engaged and educated and who drive policy and regulatory approaches that place humans at the centre and in control of frontier technologies. So it's clear we're at a crossroads. The time to put people and society at the centre of our technological choices is now. Earlier this year, Humanitech published the Future of Vulnerability report, Humanity in a Digital Age. This report highlighted the need to put humanity first, to ensure that the benefits of technological advancements are widely shared. Examples of where technological advancements have harmed humanity include entrenched bias in facial recognition and automated decision-making tools, intrusion and discrimination on social platforms, and tracking and surveillance of vulnerable people with little accountability. But there is an appetite and agenda for change across research, policy, and practice that involves putting vulnerable groups and civil society at the centre of this work, going beyond human-centred design and co-design to actively involving community in generating insights and evidence-based decision-making as part of this new business as usual. The report calls for us to shift our norms, expand our methods, and explore what-ifs by drawing on the experience of leaders in multi-stakeholder, cross-sector, and transdisciplinary approaches to the wicked social problems of our time. Some examples explored in the report include the use of blockchain and verifiable credentials by the Trust Alliance and Traverse to facilitate identity equity, putting people in control of their identity credentials. It also explores the use of blockchain and the use of local knowledge by SEMPO to build a cash transfer platform in developing countries for the distribution of cash. Another example, Ask Izzy, demonstrated how the use of smartphones can help vulnerable people find the help and services they need, moving beyond current conceptions of human-centered design and co-design to something more safely and authentically reciprocal. Ben Shaw, Ask Izzy product manager, said, companies often focus on getting data from the user. We try to flip that mindset and ask how we can share our data more effectively and give people tools to navigate it. 510 Global's use of data, machine learning and community data help plan and respond to natural disasters, while Trace the Face employs a humanitarian-led approach to testing and using new tools to reunite families. And finally, the Justice Reinvestment case study employs a community-led approach, empowering Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to make data-driven local decisions for social change. Recently here in Australia, Australian Red Cross participated as a member of the National Blockchain Roadmap Credentialing Working Group, bringing the voice of civil society and community to the national conversation around this new economic infrastructure. So what does a humanity approach to data and technology look like? Well, it's about earning the trust of vulnerable people and communities. It's ensuring humans are always at the core and in control. And it's about putting civil society at the heart of the research, development, use, and governance of frontier technologies. Thanks, Ivana.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And as always, frantically searching for that unmute button. It wouldn't be an online session if that wasn't the case. Fantastic introduction both to Humanitech for those of in our audience who haven't heard about our initiative, as well as a really great recap into some of the key insights, as well as those great use cases from the Future Vulnerability Report. And that language around those shifting norms, expanding methods, and exploring what-ifs through that multi-stakeholder collaboration and cross-sector work and transdisciplinary approaches is a really great introduction, in fact, to the work that Julian is leading and working on with the Centre of Excellence here in Australia and with international partners. So Julian, if I may, I'd like to ask you if you can tell us a little bit about what the Centre of Excellence aims to achieve and why this matters for humanitarian and social welfare organisations.
Well, thanks, Ivana. Yeah, very happy to say a little bit about it. And thanks also for the chance to participate in this great conversation. It's such a topical, urgent and complex problem. I'm really glad we're getting the chance to talk about it. Just to sort of say a little bit about the centre, I suppose. The job of the centre is to build the strategies, the tools to develop the knowledge that's necessary. That's really to sort of support the kind of agenda that Amanda's been talking about. What's necessary? What do we need if we are to see responsible, ethical, inclusive, automated systems, whether they're AI-based or blockchain or anything else in the humanitarian sector and elsewhere? What sort of knowledge base do we need in order to make sure that happens? What do we think that involves? and how do we do it? So the centre is very much about establishing the resources that enable us to proceed in that direction. What do we mean by responsible, ethical, and inclusive? Of course, it depends on the context to some extent, but we think there are some really important fundamental ideas in that. And Amanda mentioned it as well as a key set of objectives for Humanitech. I think it's terribly important that technology-driven change is responsible in the sense that there is an obligation on us to think through what the consequences of new technologies, new systems may be, especially for those who are most vulnerable, who are most likely to be affected by them. When we talk about ethical systems, we're really talking about principle-driven systems where we can say what those principles, what those rules are that have framed the design of these systems. That's also, we think, extraordinarily important. And when it comes to inclusiveness, this really is about making sure that we're not leaving vulnerable people behind when we roll out new systems. We've seen this time and time again with the development of what we call the digital social security state, for example, the emergence of electronic government and electronic services more generally, the idea of a digital first strategy in industry and in government. We see this all the time, that the technology implementation outstrips the capacity of people to use it and the ability of people to take advantage of it. So when we talk about inclusive technologies, we're thinking about how they can be made to work best for those who really need them most, stand to benefit the most from better services, more efficient systems, but are often those who are left behind or excluded by them for reasons of poor design or other forms of discrimination. So they're the overall objectives of our centre, to develop knowledge and strategies to pursue those things. We're a university-based research centre with strong links to industry, to organisations. We're delighted to be working in partnership with the Red Cross and with many other organisations from right across the community sector, industry and government. We think that in order to address the sorts of problems we're talking about, you need to do that. You need to work across boundaries. You need to work across disciplines. So we bring together researchers from the scientific, technological disciplines, data science, computer science, of course, software engineering and elsewhere. But we are particularly concerned to make sure that social science, humanities and arts perspectives also have a significant voice in this. And we think that's one of the things that have been missing, that we won't really solve these problems unless and until we can bring different kinds of knowledge practices to work, because the sorts of problems we're talking about aren't strictly technological. I think this is one of the things I really took from the report. Very important. What does it mean to put people first? It's not just about thinking about the application of new systems, it's thinking about how we conceptualize them from the start. And so that is really what we're trying to do in the centre. The centre's essential idea is that we're at a critical point at the moment. Again, I think this is something we share with the thrust of the report. There is a real urgency around these issues right now. And it's because we see ourselves as entering a new kind of phase of automation and technological change. We're very used to the idea, going back to the late 18th century and the 19th century, of machines taking over the work of people in order to make things. What's happening now, of course, is that machines are making decisions. So this is what we think of as the second phase of automation, one that as a society we're now really well and truly in the middle of. And it's one which we have to understand much better in order to mitigate the very considerable risks that are involved. Because when this is done badly, and we've seen it done badly in many circumstances, we know that the consequences for vulnerable people are very high. In that first phase of automation, when we saw machines taking over the work of people to make things, they were substituting for human labour. What's happening now, and where we see a lot of the key risks arising, is that where we have automated systems starting to make critical decisions, for example, about the eligibility of people for social security benefits or health insurance, or any of those kinds of critical areas of social life where we see these systems being used right now. What's happening is that the work that institutions used to do, people inside those places and sets of rules about what needed to happen, have been bypassed. And so machines are taking over the work, not just of people, but also of institutions. And so we've got to think very hard about where that happens and how we manage the risks when it does. So you can see that I think from just those brief remarks, Ivana, I hope that gives you a bit of a sense that perhaps the distinctive features of the centre are that we don't see automation or this whole range of new technologies as just being about technology, but also intimately involving people and institutions. This point that it's absolutely critical for us to work with, not just with many disciplines and forms of knowledge, but also across institutions and sectors, working with organisations like Humanitech, for example. And that approach, we feel, makes it possible for us to work towards practical outcomes in the humanitarian sector and elsewhere. So, for example, working out how data collaboration, data sharing practices could work better and more effectively in that sector, how we can build the capabilities of organisations and people there. That's one of the kind of key themes of our work. But so we really see that sort of cooperation and collaboration as critical for the successful translation of our research. Perhaps that gives you a bit of an idea to start with of what we try to do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Julian. Absolutely a really great overview of some of the key, I guess, areas that the center is working in, but also this idea of like the critical timing when we really need to develop this holistic understanding of these implications and not just focus on the technology side, but those social implications that cut across both our work, but our own lives as well. And talking about working across many partners, across disciplines, across industries. I think this is a really nice, again, intro or segue to Katy Southall, who's been leading the work of the Trust Alliance. Katy, can you tell us a little bit about the Trust Alliance and how the Alliance is putting humanity first approaches to technology into practice?
Thanks, Ivana, and also thanks, Julian, for that wonderful segue. Not only talking about working across disciplines, sectors and boundaries, but also about the importance of people and humans in this conundrum that we're dealing with. I'm going to just give a bit of a brief overview of the Trust Alliance first, and then I'll kind of dig into a bit of detail about some practical examples of what we're learning. So the Trust Alliance was started in 2019 by the Australian Red Cross. It's a multi-sector collaboration that brings together humanitarian, technology and research organisations who are all aligned around a commitment to humanity first, transparency and open ecosystems. So our mission is to lead the emergence of an ethical and useful digital identity ecosystem. And what that means in practice is we are harnessing diverse expertise and collaborating around real world use cases that harness the potential offered through decentralized technologies. So just a little bit of a little bit of history. I've been involved in lots of different innovation collaborations over the years, and it's always great to know where they started and what was the impetus. And like all good innovation collaborations, the Trust Alliance grew around the need for a solution to a real problem, and actually a problem that was identified through rigorous research. So it was Australian Red Cross research that was looking into volunteering, and the research showed that volunteers were struggling with onboarding with different organisations that they wanted to work with and having to do the same training over and over again. The kind of flip side for that was obviously cost inefficiencies for the different organisations who were having to onboard volunteers with the same training. So Australian Red Cross realised that there was a problem. At the same time, blockchain or decentralized distributed technologies were sort of coming into play, and seemed like the perfect solution to the problem, because it aligned so well with a humanity first approach, putting the individual in control, and with the agency to be able to decide who to share their data with, how to share it, and what to share. And so, as Amanda said, as a result of this, the Traverse tool was developed that utilised this technology, and very quickly a number of stakeholders realised that actually this technology could be utilised in many different ways to benefit the humanitarian sector and address both systems and processes issues by making them more cost effective and efficient, particularly around the onboarding of staff, humanitarian staff and volunteers, but also as a way to potentially safeguard vulnerable communities through transparency of data, and particularly around humanitarian workers who may have committed misconduct and are being recycled through the sector. So it quickly grew from, a small bunch of interesting organisations, and now we have over 19 organisations who are part of the ecosystem. It's definitely one of the most interesting and challenging cross-sector collaborations I've been involved with. And I do think that's the whole point. The whole point is that we're dealing with complex and increasingly difficult, challenging humanitarian issues. And we need to start harnessing some of these frontier technologies to be able to deal with it. And we need, as a sector, to be putting humanity first principles front and center as we think about these technologies. So what are we learning? Well, I think the most recent epiphany / insight for us has been that we need to kind of take a step back from our kind of great big audacious goal and actually really prove our value through tangible, practical use cases that demonstrate value both to CEOs and boards, but also to industry and to governments, as well as practitioners in the humanitarian space. So at the moment, we're really focusing in on child safeguarding training as the kind of first important but practical way that we can demonstrate value and proof of concept. We really basically need to educate the sector about the opportunity and about the potential for this technology. And we call it, you know, educating the authorising, building the authorising environment. So we're working both with CEOs, boards and practitioners. I think the other kind of interesting piece that we've been discovering as we've moved forward is some of those kind of trade-offs that we need to think about when we're making sure that humanity first approaches are front and central. So we've built in humanity first approaches at every layer of the tech stack. We're committed to open ecosystems, but we also understand that actually do no harm humanity first approaches mean that putting vulnerable people at the front and center of what we do means that we need to consider all the kind of potential risks. So we know that, you know, we need open ecosystems to enable portability and interoperability of credentials and for them to be useful. But we also know that it only takes a single bad actor to not only derail the trust alliance, but more importantly, put people at harm. So, so those are two big lessons. One of the other kind of pieces that we're learning is just the language that we use. We tend to kind of slip into, we love complexity as a sector, as you know, and the language we use itself can exclude people. And so developing a sort of lexicon of language that makes it clear that when we're talking about credentials and digital verifiable credentials, we're really talking about what already exists, but just that, you know, they're verifiable because they can be verified real time, and actually that means that they can't be forged, and it means that they're owned and can be owned by the individual and are portable and have more utility. So I think the last kind of point that I would like to talk about is really just the opportunity from the digital credentialing emerging economic infrastructure. It's really, you know, we're being told again and again that this is happening. And when we talk about crossroads and us having no choice, yeah, it's never more true than when we're talking about, you know, the credentialing economy. It's a huge opportunity for the humanitarian sector and something that we need to be at the forefront. It's not a choice, it's happening anyway. And it can help us solve, as I said, both efficiency issues, whilst also enabling our partners and individuals to have agency and control. But it also, you know, it's an opportunity for us to be part of this credentialing language and make sure that the credentials that are out there put human beings first ahead of technology. That'll do for now, because I know there's lots of questions.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Katy. And it's amazing just how much you've actually managed to cover in a short 10 minutes, really to connect it to the sector and to why this matters for us. And I guess both what you were talking and what Amanda and Julian are talking about really emphasizes that urgency to act and this opportunity to get involved and to and our initiatives, so Humanitech, Center, Trust Alliance, really exemplifying this creation of new business as usual, new ways of working, which put people at the center, which put also civil society and humanitarian organizations into the mix, not always just as users or consumers of these technologies or tools, but shapers and actively engaged in that space. So really fantastic. Great points around cross-sector collaboration being very complex. It is complex, it is hard, but it is also very worthwhile. Again, just linking to that theme that we explored in the Future Vulnerability Report around humanity first and around being in the mix in order to be able to influence change. So really fantastic. And you know what, miracle, I can't believe it, but we are on time, on schedule. Never happens, so well done, everyone. Just before we go into the Q&A section of the conversation, I just wanted to remind everyone on who's online with us, just check the chat, because there are the links to the Centre and the Trust Alliance and Humanitech in there. And I really encourage you to go and explore the websites. For example, with the Centre, really interesting to note, it's an international collaboration. We have partners not just in Australia but internationally, and it's an amazing, massive investment by the Australian government over the 7 years that the Centre will be exploring and delivering these strategies and tools that will help us ensure humanity-first approaches to automation. And same with the Trust Alliance, fantastic insights there in terms of how to get involved, what it's all about. So please do go and check it out. And of course, Humanitech for information about our work and the report. So I'll leave it there. Before we go into Q&A, just a final opportunity, I guess, well, not a final opportunity, but an opportunity for our panel. If you do have any reflections or any additional insights, we can go into the conversation now, and I will check the chat for questions. And unmute yourselves, please. Now, while I'm waiting for our panelists, just noting that there have been no questions in the Q&A tab, but we do have at least a question in the chat. So Amanda, Julian and Katy, do you have any reflections at this point before we go to the questions?
Just very briefly, Ivana, I mean, and thank you for but pulling together, you know, those various sort of threads in our discussion. But yeah, I should have said, I mean, I do think a kind of international approach to these problems is absolutely critical. There's been just an efflorescence of sort of nation and regional based responses, and also very sectoral. And one of the exciting things I think about the humanitarian sector is that it often reaches across those boundaries, asks us to think about what these issues look like elsewhere in other parts of the world, in the global south and elsewhere, and it also asks us to take a transnational approach. You know, exactly the kinds of problems that Katy's projects is dealing with. Very challenging, but need to be addressed. So just to say thanks for drawing our attention to that side of it, which is also a really important part of what our centre is trying to do. We haven't been able to do quite as much of this international work in the last year or two for reasons that everybody will be aware of, but we are looking forward to doing more.
Fantastic. Thanks, Julian. Okay, well, I might go into questions from the audience. People are using chat, which is fantastic. So I'll start just from the top, I guess. First in best dressed, as they say. I have a question here from Amelia. She's saying, love these ideas. As someone who works in tech, I'm interested in how we can shift norms and cultures towards beneficial outcomes for all. And I guess this one could easily go to anyone on our panel. If anyone wishes to go first, please do. Otherwise, I might dob one of you in.
I'm happy to have a crack at that one. Thanks, Amelia. Great question. So I think I would point back to something that Julian said in answering this, and which sort of struck me, and that's around how do we conceptualize humans at the centre at the very start. So when I think about how we approach technological innovation, product development from a Humanitech perspective, it really is starting to rethink how do we put humans first and foremost from the very start. So that's from engaging community or people that we are working and developing solutions for, both at the start when we're conceptualizing a product or a service, right through to when we're launching, so that at every step of that journey, we are consulting with and engaging with people who are at the very centre of that solution. So I think that that's a core piece of what we need to do. This idea of multi-sector collaboration, it is only through multi-sector collaboration that we're going to see impact at scale, that we're going to see a shift in our norms and that the ways that we develop these technologies, because we learn from each other, and there's something that everybody brings to the table when we engage in this way. And I think we've seen this, and Katy pointed to it again with the Trust Alliance. The diverse perspectives that people bring to the table when we work across sectors is huge. And unless we start doing that in a very open, honest and humble way, then that's the only way that we'll, again, see a real shift.
Thanks, Amanda.
Ivana, could I add something to those great comments from Amanda? Just thinking about this, it is a really challenging problem. I mean, this is why we're needing to bring together lots of different strands, I think, to address it. But one thing that I mean really sort of strikes me, talking in particular to my colleagues in computing sciences and in engineering and elsewhere, and I'd be interested in Katy's thoughts about this too, but is that there's now 20 years or more of solid work in computer science, especially around understanding how people interact with computing systems. It's a very well-established field. Where I suppose we think this is now moving and has to move in order to address the challenges we're talking about today is to perhaps get beyond what is sometimes a rather sort of individualized focus on what is sometimes called the user experience or something like that, to a real engagement with the social dimensions of these new systems and what their consequences are, not just for a particular user, but for groups of people. Obviously, the most vulnerable are those that we are particularly concerned about, but everybody. So it's bringing that's what's sometimes called a social computing perspective to these problems that we really think is crucial to changing, as you said, the culture and the norms from our point of view.
Yeah, I agree, and I just add a very kind of practical example. Amanda talked about Sempo, who, a case study in the Future of Vulnerability report, and also a member of the Trust Alliance. And one of the reasons that they're a member of the Trust Alliance is that they're one of the kind of few technology organisations who have partnered with an NGO, Oxfam, to develop a blockchain cash program, and they actually designed, when they were piloting, they designed real time with the community in situ, both in Vanuatu and Lebanon. And I think, and learned a huge amount from that. And one of the reasons they're part of the Trust Alliance is that we have all of these disparate examples of that kind of practice, but actually as a sector, what we're not good at is being able to learn from and extract and share that practice across different sectors and disciplines, and even with each other. You know, if we were a business, we would have huge R&D departments. As it is, you know, with the shrinking aid dollar, we're just cutting back on innovation. So we need to find ways to be able to scale those examples and learn from them and evolve them as this nascent technology progresses.
Thanks, Katy. Fantastic insights from everyone. And again, just bringing it back to that need to kind of collectively combine our skills and perspectives and learn from one another, but also, I guess, in view of those diminishing dollars, and I think academia is also not unaware or unaffected by that. I think it just puts an emphasis on why collective impact is so relevant for what we're doing. And that notion that Julian was talking about around social computational sort of emphasis, this idea why we talk about humanity first is because we're moving it away from that human-centered design approach that is always sort of applied when people think about innovation. Even in humanitarian contexts, we go down into these methods of how innovation projects work, but Humanity First elevates that and actually talks about it from the concept and throughout, always thinking about what are those unintended consequences, what is the equity issue here in terms of access, what are the risks, so we can come out with the best outcomes. So fantastic conversation, everyone. Just going back to the chat, here's one which is really fun, well, to a degree. It's about, from Caroline, it's around what are your thoughts regarding the environmental impact of some of these tools? And I'm kind of looking, well, at all of you, but maybe, I don't know, Katie is kind of going, no, but I might have to go to you.
It's
Katie.
a scary one when we're talking about blockchain technologies and environmental impacts. Yes, interesting, very interesting. It's definitely
like at the Trust Alliance in terms of thinking, because I do know there is some movement on the tech side of things to address the issues of the electricity consumption, I guess, at the moment.
It's a huge, it's a huge issue actually when we're talking about these technologies, and definitely something that we talk about. Have we got a solution to it yet? No, but it's something. I think the most important thing is that it's on the table. And as you know, we are calling on global best practice, and this technology is nascent technology and it's changing, and everything is being done globally to address that issue. I could go on for a very long time about this and get very technical, but I'm not going to.
No, that's totally fine. And I think we can also, for some of these longer answers, we can always invite the audience to reach out to us after the session and we can follow up. So very happy to do so. You can find all of our details on those websites I mentioned before. Now, moving on through the chat, I'd like to acknowledge that tonight with us we have Joachim Remakers from 510 Global at Netherlands Red Cross, one of the sort of front runners in this sort of digital data innovation response space in the movement. And Joachim was a kind and very insightful participant or interviewee for our Future of Vulnerability report. So thank you so much for that, Joachim. Now he's posted more of a comment in here, but I think that the gist of here is that we need to emphasize not only the importance of protecting personal and sensitive data, need to raise awareness of the potential harms of using digital technology, and then we do not have the time to understand fully how the technology we use works, and that exposure to risks. So really kind of pulling those threads of what we're talking about tonight. And I guess only way to sort of learn about those risks is to get our hands a bit dirty and get involved in these initiatives and learn as much as we can. A few more. I'm just going through the chat, sorry, because I'm trying to pull up the questions. Okay, so there was one from Luke, a colleague from the IFRC. He's asking, do you have any thoughts about the readiness for humanitarian organizations to handle biometric data? And then a second question there is, what are the risks of humanitarian action helping to introduce digital services to previously cash-based economies? So one is, I guess, around biometrics, and the other one is more around sort of changing the nature of economy in the local in situ almost. Any volunteers on this one? I guess I'm looking at you, Katie, mainly because you had the most experience in the sector and are familiar with some of the issues of trying to introduce technology. Not sure if we have biometric specialists though online, so that one's the one we might have to park.
No, I mean, I would say that Amanda and I in the Trust Alliance again have many conversations about biometrics because it's a multi-layered issue, and we know that there is certainly an inevitability about it in the same way that there is with the credentialing on, the credentialing economy. Again, I think the most important thing is that it is approached through a humanity first lens and not through expediency and efficiency. And actually, it's something that you have to view at from lots of different angles. Yeah. So that was a bit vague, but that's my contribution.
Julian, did you want to say something? You're on mute.
We knew someone was going to do that. Thank you. But thanks, Luke, actually, for really good questions, all of which we need to know much more about. But I think just in relation to that point you made about the risks involved in introducing digital services into social contexts which might have been cash-based or working in other ways is very well taken from my perspective. I mean, I think this is just one of those areas where we've got a lot more work to do. And for me, it's a challenging but very important part of our research centre's program, working with Red Cross and other organisations to much better understand how digital services impact communities where those things might not happen, but also what sort of information do people who are going about designing or engineering such services really need, and how do they actually work with the people who are going to be using them in order to make them work effectively? Because the track record is at least in our country, in Australia, is pretty appalling. So it's one of those areas where there's the risks are very high. The rewards are also potentially really significant. Some of the communities we're talking about are those that could benefit most from good, well-designed digital services, but that's not what they've had a lot of so far, and we've got to work out how to get that recipe much better, involving the people who are using them. So, yeah, just a few thoughts.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amanda.
Just to quickly add to what Julian was saying, I think this is why the role of civil society, having a voice and engaging in these conversations, is so important. To avoid the sort of black box development of technologies being rolled out, particularly on vulnerable people, when we don't understand how they've been developed and for what use they might be, or where the data and the technology might be used into the future. And we're sort of all being engaged in conversations at the moment around COVID-19, digital passports and vaccination credentials and the like. And this is the type of environment where technologies are being rolled out very quickly, purportedly to benefit the community and society, but could have unintended consequences down the track. And unless organisations like ours get involved at the very beginning of those conversations, we may end up with a situation that isn't something that we had intended or really is of benefit to the community.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amanda. And it is such an interesting issue. I mean, there has been a range of responses specific to the humanitarian sector to the issue of biometrics over the last number of years, from Oxfam International initially having the moratorium on its use to now cautious sort of approaches and inroads into that space. And last year, the ICRC, the International Committee of Red Cross, issuing its biometrics policy. And just very locally here in Australia, we are now reviewing, we're doing an internal sort of legal review, if you like, of the implications of our Privacy Act and biometrics legislation to try and understand how we can use some of the databases and data matching services that the ICRC is developing for our Restoring Family Links program. So we are looking at those issues as well. So fantastic question and conversation. Now I am aware it's 5:25, so I think we might have to go to a final final question before we close. And again, invite you to continue the conversation with us by following up on those web links. But also through the week, because we or our colleagues will be in sessions during Data and Digital Week. So I might go to Tim Kay's question. And he says, those are important questions you're raising. It seems the technological solutions are lagging in our sector in comparison to the private one. Is it the same in regards to questions related to technology and data ethics? So how ready is the technology to include the recent developments in data ethics? How ready is the humanitarian community to actively take those aspects into technological solutions? Or in other ways, again, coming back to that, how can we ensure responsible, ethical, inclusive approaches to technology, particularly from our sector? So I might hand over to you, Amanda, first, just that kind of final sort of overview on that aspect, and any reflections from Katy and Julian to follow.
So the question is, how do we ensure ethical, inclusive approaches to technology?
That's right, yeah. So there were a couple of questions in there, but
yeah, sorry. To get to the one I can answer. So I think, and all fantastic questions, and I'm trying to read through the chat as we go. But again, I think that coming back to that sort of humanity first approach for development of technologies, I think it is really understanding what are the potential pitfalls, where do we, as a people developing technologies, whether that be in the humanitarian sector or in the corporate sector, run into issues of blind spots where we don't anticipate the potential questions, and the work that Julian's doing in the centre will be able to illuminate some of that for us, particularly with some of these emerging technologies that we are all working in at the moment. So it's I think it is really just around a mindset shift towards that humanity first approach at the outset when we are developing technologies, engaging with thought leaders like people in academia who are engaging deeply in these conversations and understanding where some of these black spots might occur, and then developing approaches collectively and again across sectors that enable us to move forward with confidence, because I think that's what we're all lacking at the moment, is this sort of very gingerly stepping forward, anticipating that something's going to go bad, is going to happen, and what we don't want to do is stifle innovation. So coming up together with approaches that allow us to move forward, but in a way that safeguards and protects humanity.
Thanks, Amanda. Katy or Julian?
I see we've only got 2 minutes left. So I would just like to say, we've done lots of these panels recently, and these questions are without a doubt the best that we've ever had. So we obviously need to do more of this. And there's a brilliant identity one at the end that I have time to answer, which is very frustrating.
No, do answer it, because we are kind of in charge of the schedule. So
Excellent. Okay. Well, very quickly on the kind of, is the humanitarian sector lagging behind private? I would say actually it's an opportunity for us to partner in a deep and profound way with the private sector, because they need us as much as we need them to deal with the complexity and scale of the challenges, and also that harness this frontier technology, this nascent technology, which is nascent to them as well. So again, we need to be at the forefront. This is a crossroads. There is urgency behind this. We just need to get moving and do it, starting with small steps first and then growing. And I just, in response to the identity question very quickly, I think there is a big difference between centralized identity approaches and the decentralized distributed credentialing approaches we've been talking about today. So please just find me on LinkedIn and we can continue the conversation.
Amazing.
Katy, Ivana, is there just time for me to say something really briefly in response to Tim's terrific question? Clearly, technological readiness and the kind of ethical capabilities we're talking about are very unevenly distributed across the sectors we're concerned with. And so that is a major stimulus for our work. It's a challenge, as Katy said. And so what we are proposing to do, what we are starting work on is of course getting a much better sense of what the distribution of those data capabilities are across the sorts of organisations and sectors we're concerned with, what that looks like. But more importantly, on the basis of that work, it's only on the basis of that work that we can do this, but working with the sector, we have to develop and provide useful knowledge resources, useful models, useful practice frameworks that can then be distributed and which we think can then form the basis for the sort of ethical approaches we're talking about. So that's really the strategy, and I think coming back to the sort of themes of the conversation we've had so far, the only way we can do that is by working together with universities, with organisations like the Red Cross and other community sector organisations, and of course with government and with industry, and across all of the various borders that shape our work. Thanks.
Thank you, Julian. And what a fantastic finish to the conversation in terms of a call to action for all of us. I think hopefully we've convinced everyone that we do need to embark together across sectors to create this new business as usual. Now, I will share my screen again, so just bear with me for a minute. There we go. I hope everyone can see that. In interest of time, I will go very quickly through some of the key highlights. So we have talked about this humanity first, this agenda for change, earning trust, and the role of civil society, all pointing us to these new ways of working and new collaborations. To inspire you all, just a quote I have pulled out from the Future Vulnerability Report, and it is from a colleague of ours from the Global Disaster Preparedness Center, Robin Mays, who is a researcher, and she said that social agency is the core of successful, resilient communities. Our current approaches to developing technologies haven't created the methods for this yet, and that is not something necessarily to even be worried about, but rather to be inspired with and to work towards. And this is what we've been talking about tonight. Now, just a couple of plugins for what is coming up during the IFRC Data and Digital Week. Again, in the chat, we've shared the links to the Solferino website for our Red Cross, Red Crescent people, as well as the link to a webpage with Australian Red Cross sessions for our external friends and stakeholders. So please do go to those websites and subscribe or register for the sessions. It promises to be a really fantastic week. Also, another event coming up, which we have been working very hard at as a team, is the Humanitech Summit. This is an exploration of critical issues at the intersection of humanity and technology, and it will be taking place in May. And the first day, which is really the day to inspire and to really delve more deeply into some of the questions that we talked about today, will be recorded. So if you are in different time zones, you will also be able to get some of those sessions later. And finally, just wanted to say thank you to our amazing speakers. Thank you for being with us tonight, to the audience for coming from different parts of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, as well as from our external stakeholders. Really appreciate you taking the time. I would hope that you can join us in some of those sessions that I've mentioned, and again invite you to follow up with us using the links that are on the slide in front of you. Thanks again, and good night to you from Australia.